Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. So today I'm making a video about Guards of Atlantis 2. So you may notice something immediately. This is not a production copy. This is in fact a Kickstarter prototype. And it's a Kickstarter prototype that Wolf Designer, who make the game, sent to us in order to play so that we could tell you if it was any good ahead of their upcoming Kickstarter campaign. Unfortunately, we didn't get to play it because of the unique situation we all find ourselves in that also resulted in me having this hairstyle. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a bit about the game. I've not been paid to do this, and I receive no remuneration whatsoever, so I'm doing this because I wanted to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a bit about Guards of Atlantis 2, just what it is, and give you guys some insight into the rules and how the game is played, so you can try and decide if this is something that you want to get involved in during the Kickstarter campaign. I could not do this kind of video without the support of my backers on Patreon, so if you haven't had a look at that, please do take a look at it. But without too much talk of that kind of stuff, let's get straight into the meat of what is Guards of Atlantis. So what I'm going to do, instead of my full-on comprehensive setup and rules video, which goes through everything in the box in quite a lot of detail to make sure that you feel confident playing the game and getting it to the table, instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you guys some oversight and some insight into what the game is, how it's played, and what kind of experience you can expect to have from it. As you can see, I've set up a board here with some people on the board. We've got a clear red team and a clear blue team. And the blue team are the Titans, and they're fighting against the red automatons, which are the remnants of the Atlantean civilization, who are fighting against the ongoing magics of the Titans. Now, this conflict has been going on for some time, and these are just the remnants of said conflict. On either side here, we have these magical entities called thrones. This is a mechanical throne churning out these Atlantean automatons, and this is a magic throne creating these mythical Titan creatures. But really what we are is we are these hero characters, and all we know is that if we can resolve this conflict to our satisfaction, then riches, reward, and treasure await us. Or possibly a massive explosion. It's a little unpredictable. You and up to 7 other people will be taking on the role of these heroes and going against each other in a team conflict. So the game is for a minimum of 4 players. That's 2 teams of 2. And it goes up to 8, which is 2 teams of 4. The game takes about 60 minutes to 2 hours to play, and what you're trying to do in the game is to defeat the opposing team. And there are 3 ways in which you can do this. Working with your teammates is crucial to victory, and keeping your eye on all of these different victory conditions is also crucial to your success. And when in doubt, kill an enemy minion. So I've skipped over the component section that I normally put into these videos because this is a Kickstarter prototype. But I will talk you a bit through setup and give you guys some insight into what's going on. And then I will go through the rules and I'll talk how the game functions and give you some insight into how that works as well. As usual, all of the sections to the video will be in the description. So if there's something you're particularly interested in finding out more about, you can find where that is located and you can go and check it out. It's also helpful if you just want to get a general sense of the layout of the video. So, let's talk a bit about setup. As you can see here, I've already started to lay out the board. As you can see on the board here, we've got the red throne and the blue throne on the far side. Here we've got the 2 teams of minions, which I've already set up. Minions come in 3 different types, which are quite important, and we'll learn more about later. But you've got a generic melee minion here for the Atlanteans. You've also got their ranged minion here, and their heavy minion here. And these go out on set starting points. You can also see we've got the heavy, the melee, and the ranged minions for the Titans here as well. And you can see their faces depicted in each battle zone as well. So you can see here we've got the heavy Titan, melee Titan, and ranged Titan, the heavy Atlantean, ranged Atlantean, and melee Atlantean there. Heroes will start on one of these spawn points in their throne, and it doesn't really matter which spawn point they begin in. And your minions always start in the fixed space in the center of the board. What we've got here are wave tokens. If you want to play a short game, you can put out just 3 wave tokens. For a long game, you can put out 5. They just sit along the outside of the board here. You've also got these life tokens here, and these are the tokens spent by your heroes in order to respawn. If you want to play a full game, you put out 8, and if you want to play a short game, you can just put out 4. So I'll put 8 on either side of the board. Now I've already picked the 4 heroes that I'm going to be setting up, but you can pick 4 heroes from any of the heroes available to you. In the core set, you're going to get 8 heroes, so you can play a full game with 8 players. But there are 22 heroes that are going to be available for the game. And the designers describe the 8 core heroes as complex, and then the other is being divided into 4 categories. More complex, even more complex, super duper complex, and why did I choose this complex? Or some approximation of those 4 categories. So the heroes do get much more complex as you progress outwards from the core set. But for this purposes, we've used just 2 of the suggested heroes from each side. On the blue team, I've got Dodger the Warlock and Brogan the Destroyer. And you'll see that each player will need a game piece with the appropriate base color, a player board with their character's name on it, which will have a little symbol down here, which you can match up to this deck of cards, and each player will need a deck of 18 cards to go along with their character. Facing off against Brogan and Dodge, we've got the red team, Tiger Claw the Cutpurse, and Sabina the Gunslinger. When you're picking these teams, in addition to considering their complexity value, you might also want to consider these statistics along the bottom, which will give you some insight into how the character functions. Over here you've got an indicator of their attack damage, their defensive capabilities. This is the speed in which the character acts. So the higher this is, the more likely they are to get to move before your opponent's characters. And over here you've got these boots, which is how fast they can move around the board and reposition themselves. So as you can see, Tiger Claw is a character with a lot of initiative and movement, allowing him to jump around the board and act before enemy heroes. However, his defense and attack value is quite low. So now that I've got my board set up with my heroes here and here, and my red team Tiger, Claw, and Sabina over here, there's just a few more little bits to do before we're ready to begin the game. I should point out, though, that when you're picking your characters, you can use them in any combination. Dodger and Brogan can just as easily team up with Sabina and Tiger Claw on the blue or red team. Everything is entirely interchangeable. Here we've got some coins, which you achieve for defeating minions and enemy heroes. So we'll put these to one side. You'll need them for leveling up. Here we've got some various tokens that represent different things in the board. They can be obstacles and other things that are put out over the course of the game by different heroes, so I won't go through all of those now. Finally, we've got this initiative token, which you should just flip, and that'll be the team that starts with initiative. Hey, red team got lucky this time. Now you will have noticed that I didn't say pick a starting player, and that's because you don't. There isn't one. And now that we're all set up, we're actually ready to begin playing the game. So Guards of Atlantis 2 is a game inspired by the multiplayer online battle arena format, or MOBA game. In these formats, a bunch of nameless minions fight it out in the middle, while mighty heroes wander around killing them in order to gain personal power and defeat enemy heroes. Which is exactly what you're doing in this game. You can defeat these nameless mooks in the middle to level up your specific character, and as you're leveling up and accruing more powerful skills and equipment, you will become a more fearsome opponent and more able to achieve one of the 3 victory conditions. And we'll cover the victory conditions in just a moment. But first, what I'd like to talk about is the sense of the game, because as you can see, there's actually very few components. And although you can see decks of cards here, you don't actually ever shuffle and draw from this deck of cards. You'll only ever pick cards up and very deliberately play them. So without dice, without a shuffled draw deck of cards, there's no luck. This is not a luck-based game at all. The game is entirely strategy-based. So part of the core strategy for this game is to really pay attention to what cards that your opponents and you are playing, especially if you don't know the heroes. This does mean that there's definitely going to be a learning curve. If you know all the heroes and their abilities and the way they function really, really well, then you're going to come into this game with a big advantage over people that don't know it so well. But if you are a beginner, take heart, because most of the cards will come out every round, so you'll get to learn them pretty quickly, and then it'll all be about your strategic insight into doing well. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about how you win the game. And there are 3 ways in which you can do this. Your heroes can help destroy enemy minions in order to push and advance into the enemy throne. If your minions manage to enter this throne, you win the game. You can also kill the enemy heroes enough times. If you kill them a certain number of times, then their team will lose the game. Finally, these minions are going to be pushing back and forth against one another, and hopefully they'll be pushing back the opposing side as you help support your side. But if there's a tug of war in the middle, and it goes back and forth enough times, whoever succeeds in the final push, when a certain number of pushes have been made, will be the winner. So really what you're doing is you're trying to sort of engage in these 3 areas, pushing your advantage and preventing the opposing team from gaining the same advantage. So you'll be running your heroes into the middle, so you can kill the enemy heroes, which will slow them down, and it will earn you some of these valuable level up currency coins. Or you can kill minions. And killing the minions will also get you some level up currency coins, and it will help your minions on your side push forward against the minions on the enemy side. As you can see on the board here, we've got the red throne and the blue throne on the far side. We've got 5 battle zones, but we've got 3 that really matter. This one here on the red side, this one in the middle where the minions have started the game, and this one on the blue side as well. Then we've got additional battle zones, these jungle zones on either side, which are really just there to allow heroes to move around. If your minions reach the enemy throne room, then you've won the game. Minions kind of function in sort of a push mechanic. So at the end of every round, there'll be a minion conflict, and then minions will push towards the enemy base. Once they push out of this section, they'll move into this battle zone here, and if they can push from this battle zone, they'll push into the enemy throne, in which case you win. This is probably the fastest way to win the game, but it's also not the easiest. If the blue minions are all destroyed, and even just one red minion remains, that red minion will be able to push into the next battle zone, moving towards the blue throne. So this minion will push into here, and then will replace all of the dead minions back again into the new battle zone, and the conflict will begin anew. When a push takes place, one of these wave tokens is removed from the board. Now, remember, the blue minions may well push back into the center. If all the red minions are wiped out of this zone, the blue minions have successfully defended, and the conflict will push back into the center. When this happens, another wave token will be removed, and the minions will be populated again. When all 5 wave tokens are removed, the game will end, and whoever successfully won the last push, that is to say the blue team or the red team, will be the winning team. The final way for the game to end is to kill your opponent's heroes enough. When a hero dies, you lose some respawn tokens. Now, heroes have 2 different levels that gauge their advancement in the game. So here we see on the side of Tiger Claw the Cut Horse's board 8 levels with 4 numbers. Heroes start the game at level 1, which also happens to be tier 1. And between levels 2 and 4, they are tier 2. Between levels 5 and 7, they are tier 3. When they reach level 8, they become tier 4. And we'll learn all about leveling up and levels and tiers when we get to the hero leveling up section of this video. When a hero out on the board is killed, it is returned to its home base. This delays it because it's now got to move back out onto the battlefield, and also it may well have lost an action card. But it will also lose a number of respawn tokens equal to its current tier. So this is between 1 and 4 tokens. If Sabina was level 2 when she was defeated, we'd lose 1 token because at level 2 she's tier 1. But if she was level 8 when she was defeated, the maximum level, we would flip over 4 tokens because she's currently qualified as tier 4. Now this is very noteworthy because this means that a team with a runaway lead could very easily lose on the respawn token if both their heroes are taken out in a round. So those are the 3 ways in which the game can end. Let's talk about how the game is played, because the game will take place over a series of rounds until one of these endgame conditions is met. It should also be noted, if you want to play a shorter game, you just put out 4 of these tokens and 3 of those tokens. So the game is made up of a series of rounds, and each round has 2 distinct sections. The turn, a planning phase, an action phase, and an end of turn phase. And then, once 4 turns have happened, and you've reached the end of turn 4, an end of round phase takes place. Once that's resolved, it's back to the top of the next round to continue the game. Now we're going to get into heroes and their decks of cards in just a minute. So a turn is made up of 3 distinct phases. And the first one, the planning phase, is when every player simultaneously picks 1 card from their hand of 5 to play onto the table. Each character has 5 cards in their hand, and in the planning phase, each player will pick just 1 card to play from their hand of 5. Choosing the card is paramount to your strategy, and teamwork at this stage is super important to succeeding in the game. You and your teammates are allowed to talk as much as you like, planning as much as you want in how you're going to defeat the other team. However, all table talk is open, and the other team can sit there and listen to you planning and take appropriate steps to prevent what you're doing. So, while you can talk completely openly, it may not behoove you to do so. It's very difficult to kill an enemy hero without ganging up on that hero. Once every player has picked a card, all of them are flipped up simultaneously. Once the cards are face up, all table talk ceases. Players can talk a bit about what they're doing, but they have to be careful not to reveal any strategy, because it's not allowed. The second thing that happens is we now proceed to the action phase. In the action phase, each player is going to take an action, and that action is going to be somewhat dictated by the card they played. But how do we know which characters act first? Well, I'm glad you asked, because what we're going to talk about here are the initiative values of these cards. Another important thing to consider in the planning phase when you're choosing your cards are the initiative values in the top corner. As you can see here, we've got a 9, a 10, another 10 down here, and a 5. That means that Tiger Claw and Dodger are tied to act first in the action phase. When there's a tie, we come over here and we check the initiative coin. In this case, it's on the red side, which means that Tiger Claw is going to act first, and we'll flip it over to the blue side, so blue will break the tie next time. Tiger Claw will take their turn, and then we'll go over to Dodger at her level 10, and then it's Sabina at 9, and finally it's Brogan at 5. You can always get a sense of how fast characters are by looking at this little meter on the bottom of their character board that indicates the general initiative values in their character deck. We're going to look at the anatomy of these cards and the different actions and how they function in just a minute. But the actions are, by and large, move, attack, and skill. There's also a defense action, but that's only ever played in response to an attack, so you would never put it down on the table in the planning phase. We'll talk about how that's resolved in a minute. But the first thing you're going to have to know about is movement. When we want to move our heroes around the board, we're always looking at these hexes. Heroes move around hexes like this, and can move freely between battle zones without hindrance. When you play an action card from your hand, if you want to take the move action, it must have these boots on it. All of the cards will allow you to take different sets of actions based on what is present on the card here. But you can see that some cards don't have boots, and so they don't allow for movement. When you move, you can decide to do one of 2 different movement types. The first is move a number of spaces equal to the number of boots on the card. So in this case, Tiger Claw the Cup Purse could move up to 3 hexes because the boot has the number 3 on it. 1, 2, 3. It should be noted that units, which are minions and heroes, block movement. We can't move through them, so we'd have to move around them. And in order to enable heroes to get into the fight a little bit faster, the second type of movement is called fast travel. Fast travel means that you forego any of the movement spaces on your card, and instead of moving the 3 hexes like you would normally, you can instead move 2 complete battle zones. But there's a catch. You cannot leave a battle zone with enemies in it, and you cannot move to a battle zone with enemies in it. When you leave a battle zone, you can move any number of spaces, and when you move to a battle zone, you can also move any number of spaces. So in this case, Tiger Claw is leaving the battle zone here. Because there's no enemies in this battle zone, we can move in here, and we can move any number of spaces here as well. So we could just walk straight over to here if that's what we wanted to do. We could not go into this battle zone because it's not adjacent to the one we started in, and you can only move 2 battle zones. And we cannot go into this battle zone because it has enemy units in it as well. Using your heroes to block enemy fast movement is a great strategy to prevent them being able to get around the board, and also allowing you to corner one hero in order to defeat them. So now we're going to talk about attacking. Every hero has 2 attack cards in their hand, a red one, which is a special attack, and a gold one, which is a basic attack. When you're performing an attack, you're looking for the crossed swords down here with the attack value in them. Now these are melee attacks, and when we look at card anatomy in a minute, we'll talk about these different attack types. But melee attacks must be performed against adjacent targets. An adjacent target is one that's in a hex with an edge that borders the hex you're in. So in this case, Tiger Claw is adjacent to the blue minion here and the orange minion here. So if Tiger Claw had played his hit and run attack here, he would do 3 damage to this minion and kill it, because minions have no defense whatsoever and they're just dead. When you kill an enemy minion, you gain 2 coins, unless it's the heavy, in which case you would gain 4 coins. And we'll talk about the heavy minion in just a minute. There is also text in the box of the card. Now we can tell this card is primarily an attack card because the attack symbol is highlighted with color, and it says attack here in the center of the card. This means that the box of text at the bottom is applied to the attack action. So because we've taken an attack, we now read this text. It says, move 1 space after the attack. We must always resolve this text as part of this. And the text is very specific. So if it's optional, it will say may, or make it sound optional. And if it's not, it must be resolved. So now we must move 1 space. Attacking an enemy hero is a bit different. Now here we can see Dodge the Warlock has come up adjacent to Tiger Claw. Dodge has played the Dread Razor card this round, which is her basic attack card. Now this card has an attack value of 3 and a range of 1. We can see it's ranged because it says ranged here. Now a ranged of 1 is essentially the same as adjacent because you count the number of hexes, so 1 hex. So the reason this is important is because this number can be increased through abilities that improve the range of her attacks. As you can see here in the card text, there is actually text that allows her to improve the range of this attack based on where she's positioned. In this case, it's irrelevant, so she does 3 damage to Tiger Claw. It should be noted that when you're in an area and you want to attack another hero, there's no such thing as line of sight. So through rocks, through enemy units, through allied units, there's no line of sight at all. The number of damage she does is important because Tiger Claw must defend. If he doesn't defend the damage, he is killed. This is the way it works. There are no hit points in this game. It's all about defeating the damage in its entirety or not. Tiger Claw must discard a card from his hand, which means that if he doesn't have a card in his hand that can defend this attack, he's defeated. Fortunately, he's got Light Fingered, which he can discard to add 4 defense, which we can see in the shield here. You can always discard a card in your hand to defend for the value here. Additionally, you may get a defensive or attack bonus based on the location of the minions on the board. In this case, Tiger Claw would have +1 defense for having an adjacent minion. Had there been an enemy adjacent, he would have lost defense. In this case, the 2 minions would have cancelled each other out. Additionally, if there is a ranged minion within 2 spaces of an enemy that you're attacking, he would have lost defense. Unfortunately, Dodge isn't going to benefit from the blue ranged minion who's all the way over here and too far away. We can also see here an example of a primary defense card. So Dodge could discard this to get a defense value of 3, and she would also trigger the text in the bottom, which is distinct, of course, from a card with a secondary defense, which is in brown and doesn't trigger the text. Tiger Claw could also have played this defense card, which has a special defense clarification on it. As we can see here, the shield is highlighted in color, unlike the black and white shield on this card. When an item is in color, we remember we have to activate the text box. In this case it says move 2 spaces in a straight line and block a non-basic attack. If Tiger Claw had this card, that means they could move 2 spaces away in a straight line, so this is the only direction in which we can achieve that stipulation, and then we can block a non-basic attack. Unfortunately, the gold card is a basic attack, which means that dodge cannot be used to defend against the Dread Razor. The last action we're going to talk about is the skill action. Skill cards typically come in 2 forms, blue and silver. The silver is a basic skill, and the blue one is a special skill. But what we can see is that in both cases, this book symbol is highlighted in color. This shows that this is the primary function of this card, so any defense and movement shown is secondary. That means that you apply the text in the bottom of the card to do something. Now, all skills are different for all characters, giving each character a unique sense of flavor and what it can do, so you need to make sure you read this text to understand how the card functions. Now, some skills have an area of effect, which is depicted with this radius symbol here. And we can see here that this one has a radius of 3, and this one has a radius of 5. When you're working out radius, it's the exact same way as range. We just count the number of hexes. And it should be noted that when you're working out range or radius to do an attack or to play a skill, there is no such thing as line of sight or blocking. You can just count a direct number of hexes. So 1, 2, 3 to over here. It's also 3 over to here because we can count right through these rocks in the middle. And that's how you use a skill card. Obviously, I won't go through all the skills for all the characters because there are 22 of them, and we don't have time, unfortunately, in this video. But each character has a unique set of skills that they can use to give them a unique flavor and play style. There is a 4th action, which is hold. If you don't want to move or attack or do something with your card this round, but you just want to stay put, you can elect to do nothing with the card. When a player has completely resolved the action they're going to take with their card, it's moved into the leftmost empty slot on their player board to show that the card has been resolved. When every player has taken the active turn, then we have an end of turn check where anything that finishes at the end of turn is cleaned up and resolved, and if it's the end of the 4th turn, we move on to the end of the round, but if it's not, we go back to the planning phase and we play another card from our hand. It's worth bearing in mind as well that when you're attacked, you discard cards from your hand to defend. And if you're attacked enough, early enough in the round, you might not have enough cards to take an action every turn. Some cards, when you play them, have special qualifiers in the text box. For example, this round. This means until the end of the round. That is, after turn 4, the round will end. So long as there is an active ability on a card, when you move it to your player board, simply turn it sideways. So long as there is a card sideways on your player board, you can remember it is having an active effect on the battle. Some cards say this turn. In this case, Sabina would put this sideways on her player board, but at the end of the turn it face up to show that it's no longer in effect. And some cards also say next turn. Also put those sideways to remind you that next turn they will have an effect. Once the card is fully resolved, you can turn it the right way up again to show that it's resolved. Note that next turn cards affect the next turn, which means that if they're played in turn 4, they won't have any effect at all. So at the end of turn 4, our situation might look something like this, with all 4 of the slots taken up, and some cards in the discard, and some players with 1 card left in hand. Now that we're done playing out cards and taking actions, what we'll do is we'll go to the end of the round cleanup step. In this end of the round cleanup step, first thing we're going to do is any minions that have moved out of the active battle zone will be moved back into the active battle zone. This is extremely unlikely and almost always in response to being pushed or moved out of the area by a hero's ability. If there are no heroes with that ability, this will never happen. If a minion has been moved out of the active battle zone, they'll move to the nearest spawn point of their minion type. In the event that there are two equidistant spawn points, or then the controlling team can decide amongst themselves which point the minion moves to. After that, we're going to resolve a minion conflict. This is super important because this is where most pushes are likely to happen. Minion conflicts are essentially where we look to see who's killed the most minions and work out the difference. Now, in this case, it seems the red team have killed one blue minion. So therefore, the difference is 1. That means the blue team are going to lose 1 additional minion because they're down and they've lost 1 already. The blue team can decide who dies, but they cannot pick the heavy minion. There's 1 heavy minion on this board in this setup, and there might be 2 with more players. Always remove the heavy minion last. It's very unlikely that in a minion conflict all the minions would die, but if it does happen, then you simply reset the current battle zone and remove a wave token. In this situation, the blue team simply remove 1 minion, and the conflict is resolved. If there were enough losses on the blue side that they were down to their last minion, and they had to remove that heavy, then the red team would immediately perform a push, moving all the minions into the next active battle zone. Of course, the heroes just stay where they are. Now, in a situation like this, where there's a push into a new battle zone, and a hero is standing on one of the spawn points, the minion who should go into that spawn point is simply placed by the controlling team in a space adjacent to the spawn point. So the red team could just put their heavy down there, for example. And don't forget to remove a wave token when a push occurs, because that's going to advance the game towards its inevitable conclusion. Note that we might not respawn all of our minions into the next area as well, because it gets harder to push towards the enemy base as you get closer. Now that that's resolved, the next thing that happens is all heroes pick up their cards. And what we're going to do is look at these cards in a lot more detail in just a minute, but it's important to note that all heroes pick up all their cards at this point, and any active abilities are turned off. So if you had any active abilities, they would end at the end of the round no matter what. You don't carry abilities across rounds. So now that we've picked up all of our cards for each hero, we go into a mandatory leveling up step. If any heroes have any money and can level up, they must level up the maximum amount. So they must spend as much of their money as possible to go up as many levels as possible. In the early rounds of the game, this could well involve heroes going up multiple levels at once. If you cannot level up at all because you have no coins or you do not have enough coins, then instead of leveling up, you get 1 pity coin. Poor Brogan. Couldn't afford it. Now we'll talk about leveling up in a minute, but it involves going into this deck and improving your character's abilities. However, first, what we're going to do is look at a hand of cards and just what appears on those cards. Having said that, you now know enough about the principles of the game to fully execute it. The only thing left for you to discover is just what exists in here, and what exists in here, and what is so interesting about these cards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through a standard hand of cards and a standard deck of level ups as well, and just how those work. So here we've got Tiger Claw, and Tiger Claw's starting hand of 5 cards. Now, there are 2 important things to notice here. The first is that these 2 cards are distinct. The gold card is your basic attack card, and the silver card is your basic skill card. In the final game, this will actually say basic here, I think. And you can see here it says basic attack card. And these are both basic cards. They will never be improved, and you'll have them for the whole game. These other 3 cards here are your non-basic cards, and they're more advanced. And you've always got a green defense card, a red attack card, and a blue skill card. So these are your non-basic attack and skill cards. This is your defense card, and these are your basic attack and skill cards. You can also see up here a tiny little letter. This says Y, which means yellow, because this is your yellow card. And this has H. I think this is an S now. But you can also see here you've got green, red, and blue there as well. These 5 colors are present in every deck. And each card has with it associated primary and secondary actions. Primary actions are always the colored symbol at the bottom of the right-hand column. So you can see here this is an attack because it's got the colored crossed swords. This is also an attack because it has colored crossed swords. The defense card here has a colored shield. That's how you know it's primarily a defense card, although a lot of these other cards function as secondary defense cards. There actually isn't a primary movement card at all. All of the movement actions are secondary, and the Shadow Warrior card here, the basic skill, doesn't even allow for movement, even as a secondary action. In addition to their primary function, the primary action the cards perform, and their secondary functions, which are listed on the column here, they also all have an initiative value associated with them. You can see here that Blink Strike is very, very fast, and Light Fingered is very, very slow. And these initiative values determine the order in which you'll act in the action phase, which is super important because it might be very important to you to go first, and it might be more important for you to go second. So that's something to think about. When you trigger the primary function of a card, you always trigger the text in the text box. So, for example, with Hit and Run, we'll do 3 attack damage, and we'll trigger this text down here. You'll see that some cards also have subtypes. For example, attacks usually have a subtype of melee or ranged. All of Tiger Claw's attacks are melee, but we can see here on Dodge the Warlock that her attacks are both subtype ranged, which means they have a ranged function. The ranged function of 1 at the beginning of the game functionally the same as melee, but if she can somehow improve the range either through the text on the card or through her equipment, which we'll talk about later, then this will improve as well. You've also got this Dark Ritual card, which is another dodge card. This is her advanced skill, just like Tiger Claws here, but what's interesting to note about this is that it's got a subtype area. So you can see Light Finger doesn't have that, so Light Finger will give you all you need to know in the text box here in order to execute it. When you execute Dark Ritual, it actually refers to a radius of 3 spaces around the character. So that's important to note when you're reading this text here. So let's talk about leveling up. We understand that there are 8 levels available in the game, which are depicted here on your character board, as well as the amount of money you have to spend to advance through these levels. To go from level 1 to level 2 costs 1 coin. To go from 2 to 3 costs 2 coins. To go from 3 to 4 costs 3 coins. Whenever you level up, you get to go into your advanced deck of cards here and advance one of your abilities. So let's take a look. So what we can see here are a whole bunch of cards laid out for Tiger Claw. And what's important to note is, as we can see here, there are 3 different colored sets: the blue cards, the green cards, and the red cards, which refer to the 3 advanced cards in his hand. So we can actually, for this, ignore the 2 basic cards. The basic skill and the basic attack, they'll never be changed, and they're never upgraded. You'll always have them in your hand, so you might as well ignore them during the leveling up process. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at these 3. Each of these cards is currently tier 1, which we can tell from the 1 up here in the right corner. We can see the bottom row here are the tier 2 cards, and the top row here are the tier 3 cards from the top right hand number. We can also see on the far right here this purple tier 4 card. We'll talk about that later on. When you level up for the first time, you will choose one of these tier 2 cards to put into your hand. Whichever color you choose will replace the current card in your hand. So if we choose Pickpocket, we will remove Light Fingered from our hand and discard it back to the game box. It will have no further function in this game. We'll then put Pickpocket into our hand, and that will be part of our set from now on. At the start of a round, your hand will always be 5 cards, never more. When you pick a tier 2 card, it replaces the tier 1 version. So in this case, we've replaced our tier 1 advanced skill card with our tier 2 advanced skill card, or our level 1 blue with our level 2 blue. The other tier 2 advanced skill card becomes equipment, so it's no longer available to you. When it becomes equipment, you flip it over, and you put it under your player board, and you gain this ability here. So in this case, what we're going to get is a Potion of Dexterity that adds 1 to our initiative. This is 1 to the initiative of all cards. And we can see here on our player board we have an attack, defense, an initiative, and a range movement radius sort of function over here as well. So we just put this down like this to show that all of our cards are +1 initiative from now on. The next time we level up, we'll have to advance either our advanced attack or our defense card to tier 2. We cannot choose a tier 3 card until all of these cards are tier 2. Once we've upgraded our entire hand to tier 2, we can start to upgrade those tier 2 cards to a tier 3 card. And once our entire hand is tier 3, the next time you level up, and you unlock your ultimate power. This is a passive ability that you put next to your player board, and it will augment all of your abilities going forward. So as I'm sure you can imagine, once characters get to their tier 3 hands, with all that equipment, they start to get pretty powerful. You'll need to be on top of using all those skills to your maximum advantage as you move around the board and attempt to achieve those goals.